So by way of quick introduction, I am CWD's editorial director. I've had type 1 diabetes for 34 years, and I'm married to the guy I'm about to interview, which makes this super interesting and weird all at the same time. But Chris, I know you really well, but could you just take a moment to introduce yourself to people who don't know you?
So I'm Chris Sparling. I'm your husband.
Hi.
Hi. And I am a screenwriter, director, producer, and I most recently did a movie that I only wrote, I didn't produce or direct, called GREENLAND. It stars Gerard Butler and Marina Baccarin. And it is a story about a family who is trying to make it to Greenland, because in Greenland there are bunkers and there is an asteroid about to hit and destroy Earth. So it's a story about existential threat and the race for survival. And one of the characters in the movie, the boy, has type 1.
So a cheery movie for cheery times. Oh, hang on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. When it comes to actually sitting down and writing diabetes into the script, how much pressure did you feel to make sure that you did it right?
Well, I mean, certainly, you being you and me being married to you, it's like, I mean, I can't do it wrong. I mean, there is pressure.
Yeah, it would be awful.
And, as this, I wrote this movie, I didn't direct it, I didn't produce it, in projects that I have done, in addition to writing either of those jobs as well, obviously you have a lot more say over what the final movie becomes. So I did my due diligence on the page. I think the director, Rick Roman, did a really good job of staying true and hewing close to the realities and again, portraying it in a way that is accurate and fair. And in addition to, he and I had quite a few conversations. I know that he also had a family friend whose child had type 1, and he would consult them a lot as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but I think responsibility. There's a responsibility to portray it as accurately as possible.
So you mentioned talking to the director and drawing from your own experience. So a lot of people in the community wanted to know, what kind of experts are consulted in writing diabetes into a narrative? For you guys, for your team, who were your experts? Was it you? I mean, you've lived with me for 14 years, so that's...
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make me an expert, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination, but I've seen it up close and personal, enough to be able to show. And this is the tricky thing. And to be fair to say, like, if there were instances in other movies or TV shows where diabetes was kind of portrayed in a certain way that wasn't 100% accurate, I mean, of course, there are just blatant failures and things that are, borderline offensive sometimes. But leaving those aside, it's, diabetes well, let me back up. Film in general, the maxim of filmmaking is show, not tell. You don't want people just talking about stuff. You want to be able to show it happening, to dramatize it. That's like rule number 1. And diabetes is a slightly difficult disease to dramatize. Other than saying, if you, which the character does, he has an insulin pump. You show him with the insulin pump. You show the need for insulin. You have to find ways to dramatize these things. And in terms of how it manifests itself, it's not immediately apparent to people. Even in the day-to-day, sometimes you'll be low and I don't even know it until you tell me. Mm-hmm. And so you run the risk that if you try to portray those things, if you try to push the envelope too far one way or the other, now it's starting to become almost like a caricature of it. Mm-hmm. And so this was an opportunity, by having a young child as a character, a central figure in the movie, to incorporate something like that in a way that, like I said, didn't feel heavy-handed, didn't feel like just a plot device, but at the same time did serve that purpose of adding yet another ticking clock.
As my pump is beeping while you're telling this story, bringing it all to real life. Maintaining a level of diabetes information accuracy while you're writing it is one thing. And I know that is easier because you live with me and you have a level of expertise that a lot of people involved in the project don't. But what happens in the translation from page to screen, where you can potentially lose grip on keeping it accurate and grounded, and that's when things start to get maybe potentially sensationalized or making diabetes look less like it does in real life? Like, what's that like going from page to screen?
I would imagine it depends from project to project, but my goal in writing it was trying to find a balance between, portraying it accurately, certainly not falling into the category of, I don't want to criticize other people that might have done it not accurately, we'll just say, but you also have an obligation. It's a movie. You're not writing it. I'm not writing a textbook. And so, so yeah, in that framework, it's like, all right, well, how do I show this in a way, again, dramatizing, how do I show it in a way that gives it the weight it deserves? And at the same time, maybe add some clarity for the audience so they're not confused, because maybe they're not as well versed as I am, having lived with you for 15 years, to say like, all right, I know what this disease may or may not look like. And it's, as I mentioned, there are the subtleties with diabetes that make it maybe more difficult than something else. I'm trying to not give too much away about the movie, but the movie, the characters, the two parents are estranged when we meet them as a couple. And so the father is trying to, they're trying to work it out, the two parents, and be there for their son and everything. This is all pre-asteroid stuff. And and there's a scene early on where, and again, this is my effort to try to dramatize this thing in a way that's succinct and blah, 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 is that you see Gerard Butler, he's talking to his son, and he sees the pump, he sees his son's pump, insulin pump, and he's like, how's this working out for you? Do you like it better than the shots? Mm-hmm. And, and it's just a shorthand way to explain to the audience that, okay, this is a medical device, and do you like it better than the shots? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I think, you have to kind of gauge what the public understanding you think writ large is versus what you think might be too inside baseball for them to not understand.
And that was a question that a couple of people in the community had asked about writing in a way that makes diabetes clear to the general public, but doesn't beat them over the head with it. And examples like Steel Magnolias and Panic Room and that sort of stuff, where diabetes is a central plot device. Mm-hmm. Is plot device the right phrase?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Narrative device, plot device, whatever.
Narrative, blah, 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 writer words. But where diabetes plays a centralized role, and in your film, it's more of a ticking clock than a focus point. It's not a character story, it's an action story.
Yeah, it is, and it's both. It's not in the movie strictly for the point. It's not there for only to be a ticking clock. It's not there only to say, hey, this is an opportunity for me, someone who's an advocate for this and someone who loves someone who has this condition, for me to kind of maybe talk about it publicly and maybe illuminate the public a little more on this topic. Sure, but it also is about character building. In the story, the characters in the story, is that this is part of who this kid is. This is who he is, and his parents are the parents of someone with type 1. And there are those people, and I want, just like anything else, it is going to have an effect on people's lives in all the good ways, all the bad ways, and everything in between. And when you're writing anything, you don't want any character to be surface level. You don't want just two-dimensional characters. You want people that have lived real lives and feel multidimensional and everything else. And this is part of this kid's, his character.
And I know that there is stress in making sure that this looks right, and it is right, because you respect and love this community. Words I'll put in your mouth, I know you feel that way.
Of course.
But there are going to be changes to the story that you have lost a little bit of input on because of the nature of being the writer versus the director. And so what is it like for you, knowing that some of those things were changed?
Well, it's not just diabetes stuff. I mean, there are plenty of things in the movie that aren't exactly what I wrote. I mean, that's just the nature of when you transform or transmute one medium into another. I mean, something's going to get lost, especially when you're going from a written piece of paper to a movie with all these moving parts. Some things just become, they're not feasible anymore. Mm-hmm. And so changes happen. So that's the nature of the beast. But just as an anecdote, or an anecdote for you, I remember when I was on set, I was on set for a short time, as you will remember. And I remember being there. There's a scene early on in the movie, again, pre-comment, for when Jerry and his son they're at the grocery store, and I told you the story. And
you didn't tell them, though.
No, that's what I'm telling you now.
Yeah.
I'm telling the royal you. The son is, they're going shopping, and the son goes, "Oh, can I have some juice? Can I get some juice?" And the father's like, yeah, let's get it, or go get it, sure. And I remember telling Rick, the director, I'm like, I don't really see, like, juice kind of, it's not to say, I'm like, again, I've seen this from you. It's not like,
Chris, I've brainwashed you into thinking that juice is medicine and that no one drinks it for fun.
That's what I mean. No one drinks it for fun. It's not that you couldn't drink it. Of course you can. I know you can, and you can just do what you need to do in terms of your insulin adjustment, so on and so forth. And I know anyone can, but I just have never really seen you drink juice for fun. It's always there to, like, when you're low, we'll get the juice. And so I was kind of like, and so I brought it up with him, and then again, I think I mentioned this previously as well, is that Rick also was consulting with some family friends of his whose child had type 1, and he was kind of, he had them on speed dial if he had any questions or wanted to make certain things were right. And he's like, no, I talked to my friend, and they said they let their kid drink juice, no problem. And I was like, yeah, I mean, intellectually it made perfect sense to me, because I was like, yeah, I know you can, but I just never had seen you really do it in that way. And so I bumped on it for a second in the moment. But to me, that spoke to, again, like what I'm accustomed to. I'm accustomed to being married to you, the person with diabetes, as opposed to, say, someone's experience of being a parent with a child with diabetes. And so I don't know. I just thought it was a kind of, I don't know. I think it's two things. I think it was just an interesting moment to see play out in real time, to have a conversation. At the same time, I was happy as that was going down to know that Rick was taking it that seriously.
Mm-hmm. And of course, no family approaches diabetes in the same way. So while juice might be considered medicine in our house, other people do what they want to do. So there's like no one size fits all approach to diabetes. And so of course, an application from paper to film, there's going to be no one size fits all representation of it either. It's just, I don't know, I'm proud of
you. You know what it was though? It wasn't that I thought like, oh my God, this kid can't drink juice. Like, he's diabetic. That to me, like, that is the wrong depiction of diabetes and stuff like that we've seen in movies and TV all the time. Like, oh, they can't eat that, they have diabetes. And then you get into the offensive jokes and everything else. But it was like me, perhaps maybe being a bit overzealous, where I was trying to be so protective of trying to portray this accurately. Like, I didn't want parents watching this, or anyone with type 1 really, or anyone that be saying like, why is that kid drinking juice? Like, why and so I was like, being overzealous in that regard, perhaps.
And that is, if you're living with a health condition, anytime that you see any representation of it anywhere, you can't help but pick it apart and say, no, that's not right, or yes, that is right. And so that's going to happen no matter how well written and how thoughtful the script has been. But are there any scenes that you found particularly challenging to write or to convey in terms of making sure diabetes was portrayed accurately? Or were there any scenes in general that you just found challenging to write?
There was, in general, yes, I'll start with that one. There was a scene where, again, try not to give away too much, where Marina Bakarin's character, she's with her son, and they've been separated from the dad. That's a big part of what's going on in the movie. They're trying to reunite as they try to get together to Greenland. And they end up getting help from strangers, and it starts to go south, where, and the difficult thing was, again, you don't want to make one-dimensional characters, and these people that they encounter aren't villains. They're not awful human beings, but the circumstances have brought out in people, these are they're facing life or death consequences. Everybody is. And it's the question is constantly being asked throughout the movie. What would you do? What would you do? How far would you go to protect you and your loved ones? Mm-hmm. And these people are, they are a couple, and they are each other's loved ones, and they naturally want to protect each other too. And there's there's a thought of an opportunity of how these two new passengers with them might be able to afford them access to safety that they otherwise wouldn't have. But it comes at great cost and bending of morality.
Do they eat them?
No, they don't eat them. They don't eat them. It's nothing like that. But it was a difficult scene to write, because you don't want to make, if that's your goal, if you're trying to portray a situation that seems realistic given the circumstances, you have to kind of walk that tightrope or maintain that balance of people not seeming cartoony in their villainy. And
did you have to take any steps to explain why insulin would be so important to this family? Because I think about in terms of,
that's a big part. I'm sorry, you were saying about
I was going to say, even now with the pandemic, like as you and I think about our family and what's important in our house, insulin is always a hot topic in terms of making sure we always have access. So how did you kind of integrate that thought process into this story?
That's part of that, you know, personal ticking clock, if you will. Like he is separated from his dad, and his dad is the one who had the bag full of his diabetes supplies. So basically they have a go bag. They're trying to get out of the house and trying to get to safety and everything else. And they get separated. So Gerard Butler's on his own, the mother and the son are together. But when they get separated, the dad is still in possession of the diabetes supplies, including the insulin. So we watch now as the necessity and the importance of diabetes for this child's safety, separate and apart from incoming asteroid. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that he still needs his insulin, you know, in the moment even. So like, showing that became not just a ticking clock, but it also became an ongoing, you know, a thing looming, you know, on the horizon for this family.
Yeah, because that's a very real, I mean, as you know, that's a very real concern for people on the day-to-day of living with diabetes. Never mind emergency situations where access, if an asteroid is coming, becomes, oh my God. But just sometimes it doesn't take an asteroid to have access become an oh my God sort of moment. So I'm looking forward to seeing a discussion about the need for insulin really, really shown to the greater public that doesn't understand what diabetes is, to see that insulin is not just something that you take to eat your cupcake. It's like, this is what is required to survive. That's a missing element for a lot of people.
And I think it's really put into pretty stark relief because of what I just said. It's like you have an asteroid that's going to be hitting Earth in whatever amount of time, but you still need your insulin. This boy still needs his insulin now, because if the goal is for them to successfully get to the bunkers in Greenland, they have to physically get there safely. And there's a scene early on in the movie that, you know, where again they've been separated, and so the boy needs his insulin. His mom needs to get, again, speaking to the larger picture of thematically of like, how far would you go? What would you do to protect those you love? Or we see she's trying to find it, and she finds a CVS, but it's bedlam by this point. I mean, it's chaos, and it just becomes very, very dangerous for her to even try to do this. But it's what she has to do.
Who's the actor that plays the kid with diabetes?
Roger Dale Floyd. He's a child actor. Naturally, he's not an adult, trying to be a child. That he was in the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep. Nice kid, lives in Atlanta with his mom and dad. His dad's also an actor, not in Greenland, but he's an actor. I met them. Nice family. And so, yeah, it was interesting even talking to the mom and dad, because naturally he's a kid. I mean, he's like 8 years old or so. And, you know, he had to do his own character work as any actor does, where you start to, you know, you need to try to embody a character. And so he didn't know anything about type 1 at all. And so
that's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Was there anything?
Yeah. So his parents, naturally, I mean, he's a kid. They were instrumental in I remember talking to the dad at length and the mom at length too, about like what they did to educate themselves as best they could on the disease so that they could help him get into character.
That's pretty awesome. I like the idea that people who didn't know about diabetes are now more informed as a result of working on this film. There are small wins all the way across, but that seems like a great one too. Nice job, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know that the character with type 1 wears an insulin pump in your story. And so what made you decide to do an insulin pump and have him pricking his finger versus wearing a CGM? And what made you embrace some visible aspects of diabetes and some of the tech aspects and not others?
If you go too subtle, the audience might not get it. Okay. But if you start to make it too complicated for an audience that might not be well versed on it, they end up in the weeds, where it's like, if he has a CGM and a pump and it's like, I'm not understanding what this condition really is. So again, it's what your job is as a screenwriter all the time, is that you're finding a shorthand with the audience. How can I convey something succinctly that they will understand, and I don't have to constantly have to explain it to them? Because you don't want them focused on it. You don't want people trying to figure out something when the story's continuing. You don't want someone stuck in place and then having to try to catch up. So yeah, I mean, it's with a pump, it's more visual. I could have done shots. I mean, that would have been fine. But again, in establishing the shorthand, the scene that I wrote early on, where again, Gerard Butler sees his son, family, he and his wife have been estranged for a little bit, so he's been away from the house. He's coming back when the son has made that transition from shots to a pump.
So I have seen one still where it shows the boy is wearing a Medtronic insulin pump, one that I wore like years ago and is not the most up-to-date version. So do you know why that particular model was chosen, or do you have any idea as to why versus
no,
I wear currently?
I mean, that's the props department would have come up with that decision. Gotcha. And they would have run that by the director. I would imagine though, and again, this is purely me speculating, like your pump now versus that older model Medtronic one, your pump now is very sleek and, almost looks like a cell phone, any cell phone. So if again, speaking to what the baseline understanding for an audience might be of diabetes, if you showed them something that they saw and were like, well, what was that? I don't know what that really is. Versus the Medtronic pump just looks more clinical. It looks more medical, like a medical device.
It is older too. I mean, the model that is used is older, not like.
Right, it is. It's right. And again, I'm just purely speculating because I don't know why the props department shows that.
When I saw that still, I was like, I wonder if they use that because it looks more medicinal versus a lot of the more updated pumps have a tendency to look more discreet. And I had a little like, oh, that's kind of cool that we've come at least far enough away that diabetes devices now just look cool.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the audience might not have even known. So in that quick look at what it is, they might have said, oh, does he have a phone or what is that?
Right. Was there anything about wanting to add diabetes into the script or the way that you wrote diabetes into the script? Was there any desire or attempt to kind of peel back some of the stigma and misrepresentation and misunderstanding about diabetes in society as a whole? Big question.
Yeah, no, again, it was, look, I've been sitting next to you on enough nights, on the couch watching a TV show where there's the diabetes joke. And it's just like, oh yeah, eat that, you're gonna end up with diabetes. It's like over and over, and it's not just about that. I think that's just, again, just stupid and offensive and idiotic, frankly. But like, I don't know I can't point to too many accurate depictions of it in media.
I know I'm trying to think of some too. There are too.
Yeah, I mean the Jodie Foster movie with
Panic Room.
Panic Room, yeah. It's been a while since I've seen that, so I don't really remember. But I remember it being. I
remember in the movie she was wearing a watch that told her what her blood sugar was, and I was like, oh my god, that would be so cool to have that someday, and now we do. So that's kind of cool to think about. But I remember the character pawing through an emergency box in their panic room looking for something to treat a low with, and just it was not as eye-rolly as a lot of other depictions that have happened over the course of the last 30 or 40 years.
So I tried my best anyway on the page to say like, this is going to be a movie where diabetes features pretty prominently, where there's a child with type 1, and the goal on that front is, to make it a real part of the character, make it a part of the narrative drive, but also at the end of the day, maybe inform people a little more about the disease.
Well, and like we said before, it's an asteroid movie, not a diabetes movie. And again, I don't want to liken it to the Babysitter's Club Netflix reboot or whatever it was, but seeing diabetes on screen as something that was just baked into the character, not as the whole of their character, but just a portion of it, does a lot for me as a person with diabetes, because it's like, yeah, that's part of the person, and it's nice to see part of the person represented on screen, but doesn't become the driving force of their entire existence. In the movie, it's a ticking clock, as you had mentioned, but it's just kind of cool to see someone wearing an insulin pump or somebody checking their blood sugar, whether it moves the story forward or not. It's just cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of just like anyone, it's part of anyone living with diabetes. It's part of your everyday.
Where can people watch the film? When does it come out, and where can people see it?
It will be available on all streaming platforms on December 18th. And then it will be exclusively released on HBO Max in early 2021.
Nice. Well, I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And thanks for sitting, making it look like we live in separate houses. But
Ready? Hold on a second. I want to do something. Ready?
hear him. Oh, proof that we're in the same house.
I'm shrinking.
Thanks for visiting me today.
Thank you for inviting me.